Hey, welcome back to the channel. Welcome back once again to Stable B, our favorite place. It is nearing the end of the year, and for me personally, Halloween just happened. The season is coming to an end. The snow is starting to fall. The weather is getting cold and brisk and windy and chilly outside. And so it is hitting that sad time of year where we are not as able to ride our motorcycles anymore. Many of our race seasons are coming to an end. If we're just doing track days, the tracks are starting to close and not offer track days anymore, especially for motorcycles. No one likes to ride a motorcycle in 30-degree weather on an ice. If you're down somewhere south, Southern California, Nevada, Arizona, Texas, Florida, this video is probably not for you because you have a long season. It's actually just like all year. You can keep riding, that's great, and I'm a little jealous. But if not, if you're up in the northern part of the US or anywhere else in the world where it might get cold, this video today we're gonna talk about winter layup, as I like to call it. So the things that we do with our motorcycle over the winter to make sure that next season when we pull it back out, start doing track days again, get back into racing, or just riding in general, our bike is ready to go. So that's what we're gonna talk about today. Before we get into it, please click the subscribe button down below, throw a like on the video, and if you have any questions while we're going through all of this, leave them down in the comments below, or as always, you can hit me up on Instagram at JKMotoPodcast. I'll answer any questions you send my way, and if I can't answer them, I can probably find someone that can, or I'm definitely willing to do the research. So let's get over the sad and depressing fact that we can't ride motorcycles anymore because it's getting too cold, and we'll go ahead and talk about how to properly put our motorcycles into winter layup. All right, winter layup. What do I mean by that exactly? What is winter layup? What is layup? What is winter? I think we all know what winter is. Period of time where you can't ride motorcycles anymore and you get really sad because you can't ride motorcycles and that's all that matters in life. But winter layup is an important step or things that we can do to our motorcycle to ensure that she will be safer, happier, and ready to ride next season when we pull her back out. So for a lot of people that looks like just putting the motorcycle in the garage, shutting the garage and not thinking about it because we're too busy shoveling snow or whatever else. Some people probably already do a lot of these things that I'm gonna mention. So if you're in that category, great for you. If I'm missing anything, if there's anything else you think of, I ask that you throw those down in the comments so that other people that are watching this video can read through the comments and find those things that I might miss. I don't know everything. Also, if you're watching this video and you don't know if I'm missing something because you're much like myself and you don't know everything, feel free to check down in the comments for things that other people mentioned. I was gonna make a joke and say that you should really just drain all your fluids, pull the engine out of the bike, tear it down, take it every individual piece, bag it separately, put it in a box, label the box, label all the parts, and put it back together next year. But that's not true. You shouldn't do that. So pretty simple what to do for winter. First thing we're gonna talk about, which if you don't have these two parts, it might be a little difficult, but as you can hopefully see, this motorcycle is up on stands. We have a rear stand back here, that's down here, and then a front stand up on the front. What that does for us is keep this tire up off the ground. These are brand new tires for me, and I am still gonna go ride this bike in a few weeks, so some of the things I haven't done yet, but we're gonna talk about it anyway. But these tires stay up off the ground. When you leave your tires on the ground over a long period of time, they can get a flat spot, especially if there's a lot of weight on it. So if you're putting your motorcycle on a kickstand for 6 months or more, you could come back to a flat spot in your tire, and that could effectively ruin that tire over the winter. Now, it depends on a lot of different things. There's also just tires in general. If you store a lot of extra tires, you should not leave those out in the cold over the winter because they'll harden and they can lose their chemical consistency and that can be a problem. So tires is kind of a whole different subject. We had a podcast on that. I recommend you check it out. We talked with the tire expert, Pirelli tire expert specifically about all that. So go check that out. Good long podcast, but he kind of talks about what to do over the winter. But if you have extra tires, you want to bring those inside or at least make sure they're going to be in a place where they'll stay relatively warm if you're in really, really cold temperature. But on your bike, you want to keep those tires off the ground, so front and rear stand can help out a lot with that. Get up on the front and rear stand, get it ready for the winter. I'd say that's step number one. If you don't have a front and rear stand, definitely recommend you go buy it. We will have a video coming out about how important that is, what all that can do for you. Okay, number two, which this guy's actually not in use right now, but that right there is what we're gonna call a battery tender. So that's gonna keep our motorcycle battery happy over the winter. One thing that I do to all my race bikes that I can just put them on a tender pretty easy, when I say race bikes, I mean race bikes and track bikes, is install an easy to get to little battery tender clip. When it's winter time or any other time where the bike might be sitting for a while, allows me very simply to be able to plug that in and it's not a problem. It's also zip tied up in there so it can't come out, it won't get in the way of anything, and it just sits nice and easy and I can keep this bike plugged in. What that's gonna do is keep that battery nice and healthy over the winter and ensure that I don't have to go buy a new battery as soon as I wanna start back up. I can keep it charged. So battery tenders are pretty important. I'm not a battery expert, and there's the lithium battery stuff. Some batteries are better not on a tender. There's also other options. You can remove the battery from the bike and just set it on your workbench or inside or whatever and just put it on the tender. You also don't have to have it on there like all winter long. I think it's better for battery health than cycling it if it has a slight draw on it or if it just dies over time. Batteries tend to do that. But at least it's much easier. If you're not gonna use the bike, you got the space, just throw it on a tender, have it there all winter, very easy. And then when you start back up in the summer, you'll be able to just ride off and go. So if you have more information on lithium batteries that I'm missing here, go ahead and leave those down in the comments. I appreciate that, but battery tender is pretty good. They're not the cheapest thing in the world, but they are cheaper than buying a new battery. And so if you're like one of the guys that like every season, it seems like you get to go get a new battery because your battery just dies after winter, get a battery tender, plug it in, you'll be good to go. All right, next thing we're gonna talk about. This is engine ice, performance racing coolant, which is glycol free. This type of stuff is required when you go do track days or you start racing. So there are a couple options when you go do your first track day, or really once you start doing a bunch of track days. A lot of times it's not required for the beginner groups or just for track day at all. But if you're putting a motorcycle on a racetrack, you should go ahead and pull your glycol-based coolant out of the bike, because if you go down, it gets real slippery on the track. Other people ride over it and then they don't have traction and then they crash, and it's your fault because you left a bunch of coolant on the track that was not glycol free. So there's plenty of companies out there that offer solutions to that. A big solution that a lot of people just use, deionized water. You can absolutely throw water in your bike, just run water. You can run water wetter, you can run engine ice, you can run a whole bunch of different stuff. The issue with that is if you leave that water in your bike for a long period of time, it is going to corrode the internals of your bike. And so you can either flush it all out and replace it with coolant, or what I did, because I hate doing that, I hate just changing out my coolant all the time, was research some specific anti-corrosive engine coolant that wasn't glycol based. So Engine Ice offers glycol free anti-corrosive coolant that you can leave in your bike over the winter. But if you've been doing track days all season, you're putting your bike up for the winter, or even for like a month or two, realistically, sometimes even a week or two, you should definitely not leave your water in there. Definitely not over the entire winter. So go ahead and pull that water out. If you live in a colder climate, it can be really good to put antifreeze in there, because you also don't want whatever water might be left in there to expand when it freezes. And if you have a heated shop, not worried about it. But depending on where your motorcycle's being or gonna be stored, just think about it. Think about the real, like, okay, actually, how cold does it get out here where this motorcycle's gonna be? Probably a good idea to go ahead and drain all your whatever coolant you have in there out and put an antifreeze in there that'll keep the engine of the motorcycle safe over the winter so it doesn't expand and crack things. And also will prevent a little bit of corrosion. Also, the antifreeze itself, that anti-corrosive property is also pretty good at like flushing the system out. So that is how I would do the coolant system for winter layup. Once again, if you don't live in a super cold place, but you still have the kind of winter period, don't worry about the antifreeze per se, but you definitely don't want to leave a water or a non-corrosive coolant in there for long periods of time. So go ahead and drain that out. You could leave it dry. I wouldn't do that either. I would just throw something that's anti-corrosive in there, kind of give the system something to keep it from corroding while it's just sitting there. If you leave it dry, you're gonna have oxygen in there. There's still gonna be some water molecules in there unless you completely blow it out, which I don't know. You can do that, absolutely, but probably not worth it. And that oxygen will mix with the water, mix with the metal, create some corrosion, and you're gonna degrade your coolant system and your engine integrity over time. So clean up your coolant system, put some antifreeze in there if you're in a super cold place. If not, probably still just put antifreeze in there. You want some sort of fluid in there, but you don't want it just water, because that will corrode the system over time. Okay, I should have grabbed it beforehand. We got some right here. Ooh. This isn't actually the stuff I use, but this will do for the demonstration purpose. One of the other things I was thinking about that I don't know if I've actually done in the past, but I realized it could be a pretty good idea, especially if you live in a more humid climate. Something that motorcycle riders are usually pretty good at and pretty good at maintaining and keeping up on is chain maintenance and chain lube, right? So cleaning your chain and putting some chain lube on there. But especially in the winter, right before you go into a long storage period, you wanna I would put like a big, hefty, nice coat of chain lube on that chain. You know, get it cleaned off, get everything off there that might be bad for it. Put some nice hefty chain lube on there that is just gonna be able to sit on there and keep a kind of protective film layer over that chain over the winter. If you clean it off and leave it completely dry, if you live in a humid climate or even not, honestly, you're gonna see a little bit of rust start to form over the winter. So go ahead, put a nice layer of chain lube on there. You can get something different than what you normally use, maybe just something cheap, or like this is a wax. Honestly, it'd be probably pretty good for the winter because it's really just meant to sit there, right? When you're out riding, the chain lube's gotta be a little different, but you want something that'll sit there and protect the chain and keep it from leaving any rust or anything on the bike and obviously, once again, degrading the physical integrity of the chain itself. So get yourself some chain lube. If you don't already have it, I got news for you. You should be lubing your chain pretty often. Very important stuff to do. But definitely throw a fresh coat of chain lube on there for the winter and just kind of let it sit on there all winter long. Don't go like, I would make that like your last thing, right? We're talking like, I am not riding anymore. I am putting this bike up for the winter. It is gonna sit in the garage in winter or cold season layup, not to be ridden. So done with your last ride, you come in, go inside, you get dinner, you shower, whatever, wait a couple days, you come out, and that's when we're doing all these things, right? Getting the battery tender on, getting some fresh chain lube, getting the tires up off the ground, all those different things. So understand it's not like, okay, yeah, hey, I'm gonna put it up in a couple weeks, so I'll go ahead and do that all now. You wanna do it when you're done for the season, you know you're not gonna ride again. The nice thing is that most of these things are not ridiculously expensive. So if you have like a track day come up, you're like, oh, you know what, I'm actually gonna travel down to Texas or down to Florida or out to Nevada or down, whatever, to go to a track day. It's not too big of a deal. Yes, a little bit more effort, but it's not too big of a deal to pull it out of layup, undo all these things, go down there, ride, come back and do it again. But you don't wanna like be riding the next day. If you're riding the next day, just ride the next day and then come in and do it. I am holding an oil filter and I don't really know why, because I don't think you should change your oil. We are gonna talk about oil for a little bit. So I do have an interesting video out on the channel and a podcast. You're changing your oil too often. A lot of research went into that. I definitely recommend you check that out. The second one is the podcast that I did with Blackstone Joe over at Blackstone Laboratories. Check that out also. But after listening to their podcast, doing some research and finding some things out, something that I used to do at the end of winter layup was change my oil. Every year, at the beginning of the season, I would change my oil. No matter when I last used it, how many miles it had on it, or anything else, it's like, this oil's been sitting for too long, I'm gonna change my oil. That is 100% a myth, which has a lot of scientific factual data behind it. If you want to look into that, you can look into it more. Oil companies would love you to just keep buying their oil. That's great. I love the oil companies, got to keep them in business, but I got to save money. I need money for tires and I need money for tickets to track days and races and everything else. So if I can save money somewhere, I'm going to. And one of those places is specifically not doing an oil change just because my oil's been sitting. So if you've only done one track day on your oil and you're gonna put it up for the winter, you do not need to rechange your oil next year. You don't need to rechange the oil to put it into winter layup. In fact, draining the oil is probably one of the worst things you could do. But realistically, put your bike in winter layup. The last time you rode it, all that oil is gonna create a nice film over everything. It shouldn't dry out over time because the oil's nice and sticky. You could get some like stickier winter oil probably somewhere. I don't have any information on that and I don't think it's necessary. But when you pull it out next season, please understand you don't need to change your oil. Now, if you had like 5 or 6 track days on it, or you had 10,000 miles on that oil, go ahead and change it before you throw it in winter layup. Just make sure you run it afterward to get all that oil all the way through the system. If it's only got one track day, it's only got 500 miles, whatever it might be, just because it sits over the winter does not mean you need to change your oil first thing before you start riding. So I just want to bring that up as something that we are not going to do for winter layup. If you want to, by all means, go for it. It's your money, it's your bike, but I don't think it's necessary, and there's some scientific data behind the fact that oil doesn't just break down over time. Whether it's in a bottle or in a sump or wherever it might be, it's not gonna break down over time. It's still gonna have the same lubricity and different properties that it would have beforehand after it's been sitting for 6 months or however long your winter season might be. So no need to change your oil. All right, that's pretty much gonna wrap up this video. The only other thing I was kind of thinking about was, hey, should I come out and start my bike every month or every 2 weeks or every 3 months or whatever? I can say that this bike right here has sat for, like not right now, but in the past it has sat for months at a time, and I never started it in between that time. And there's never been an issue with it. I think it's kind of a thing of the past. You don't want your gasoline to get kind of gunked up in the lines on the older vehicles that had all the rubber fuel lines and all those different things. There were some issues with gasoline. And I don't know. I don't know where that came from, and I don't have a ton of information on it, so I don't want to put out wrong information, but I don't think it's necessary to start your bike over the winter. If someone has something different on that, please correct me. Leave that down in the comments. I'm all about it, but we should be good. We bring our bike in, get it up on the stands, get the battery on a charger, a tender of some sort, get your coolant changed out for something that is anti-corrosive, at least especially get the water out of there, and then don't worry about your oil too much. Unless you're due for an oil change, go ahead and change it. Get some lube on your chain, you'll be good to go. Just make sure your tires stay nice and warm over the winter. You don't want those hardening up. I think that's all the points I have. I don't think you need to come start your bike. I don't think you need to drain your brake fluid. I don't think you need to drain your gasoline. I don't think you need to do all those different things. If you're a super maintenance technician type of guy and you've got all these different reasons for everything that you do and you got a lot more than what I just said, go for it. I'd also love to hear about it. But I think for the majority of us, the things that I mentioned are pretty good. That'll put our bike in a nice, safe winter layup condition. The only other thing we have to worry about is dust buildup, right? So come out and dust your bike off every once in a while, get the nice dust off out of there. Also, you do want to check on it from time to time, make sure that the gravity is not pulling that one spot of the tire down. So rotate your tire a quarter turn every 2 weeks. I'm just kidding, that's not necessary. But check and make sure your battery tender is actually working. Make sure the chain still has that nice film layer on it. Those are things that you can do if you're really missing your bike over the winter. I know I come out here and I just kind of talk to them and tell them my feelings and just sit on them and pretend like we're riding. You know, I'll bring the Xbox out into the garage and play a racing game while sitting on the motorcycle, so I feel somewhat happier during these sad months. But in reality, if you do those few things, that should set you up for next season. Make sure you're good to go when you dust the bike off, pull it out for next season, enjoy some track days. So stay safe this winter, you know, be okay, hang in there. We'll get back to it. Next season will be around. And if you're really itching to ride, you can always go down south. That's what I'm doing in a couple weeks, heading down to Texas. So those are options. Hit those places up if you're into it. If not, put the bike in a winter layup and enjoy it. And appreciate you guys watching. We'll see you guys in the next video.